Deberían ir a la cárcel los responsables del mantenimiento y, por supuesto, de la reparación de las vías de la tragedia de Adamú. Deberían ir a la cárcel sin ningún tipo de duda. Hoy os traigo no la opinión de cualquier periodista o de cualquier ingeniero, que no le resto importancia, por supuesto, sino la crítica y reconstrucción de uno de los mayores expertos a nivel mundial de accidentes de trenes.
Viajaba en el Lirio de Málaga a Madrid. Se quedó como a medio camino de volcán entero. Yo tuve suerte, pero por ejemplo mi hermana no, y está en la UCI. Yo pensé, hasta aquí. Me giré, miré a mi hermana, como diciéndole adiós, y se apagó todo, solo chillidos. Empecé a gritárselo a todo el mundo, está embarazada, está embarazada. Entonces cuando vieron los bomberos, pues fueron a por ella, la sacaron y está en la UCI.
Nuestro queridísimo protagonista y por supuesto ingeniero y experto en la materia se llama Gareth Dennis. Aquí tenéis su perfil en Twitter, aunque os voy a dejar en la descripción del vídeo su canal de YouTube, donde tiene algún que otro vídeo y creo que va a subir alguno más desmenuzando la tragedia de Adamú. Gareth lleva muchos años haciendo investigaciones y estudios sobre accidentes de trenes, y lo que ha aportado, aunque reafirma la teoría principal a la que debería agarrarse la investigación, aunque bueno, ya veremos lo que tardan los expertos y el comité, que por cierto la Unión Europea, siendo lo que es la Unión Europea, ha denunciado que no se fía de la supuesta comisión de expertos que está investigando este incidente. Bueno, pues lo que revela Gareth Dennis es absolutamente revelador. Antes de entrar en materia con el experto, quiero que veamos un par de cositas que están aconteciendo hoy mismo y que son, iba a decir la gota que colma el vaso, pero es que el vaso ya ha estallado de la mierda que sucede en este país y que por supuesto que rodea a este gobierno. Una de las exploradoras, una de las máquinas que está haciendo inspecciones, porque han puesto o han activado unas cuantas por todo el país para que examinen todo nuestro sistema ferroviario, ya que el escándalo es sumo y ha provocado que los maquinistas convoquen una huelga general, por cierto los médicos también, y yo estoy hablando con diferentes influencers para que tratemos de unificar fuerzas y provocar o generar un llamamiento a la huelga general de todo el país y consigamos paralizarlo. Bueno, seguimos. Una de las exploradoras ha tenido un accidente. No nos da la seguridad necesaria para sacar los trenes. Tiene que revisar toda la infraestructura de manera exhausta. ¿Cómo tiene que ser que la máquina que se encarga, una de las máquinas que se encargan de revisar nuestras vías, incluida esa máquina, ha tenido un accidente? Pero es que la cosa no queda ahí. Que resulta que hoy también ha habido otro accidente ferroviario. Algunos dicen, bueno, no se ha descarrilado. Bueno, pues nada. Que hayan 200 accidentes al día, que no pasa nada mientras no descarrilen o fallezca una persona. Es alucinante. Accidente en Cartagena. Un tren choca contra una grúa. Ahora, muy atentos a lo que cuenta Nacho Abad, porque es una absoluta barbaridad y es una de las piezas fundamentales, entre otras tantas, que conforman el puzzle que estamos tratando en el vídeo de hoy, que corrobora y demuestra que tanto los responsables del mantenimiento de nuestras líneas ferroviarias y toda la infraestructura, como los responsables de las mismas, es decir, el Ministerio de Transporte y por supuesto su máximo dirigente, deberían ser juzgados e ir a la cárcel.
A lo que les cuento que creo que va a servir para ver las costuras del sistema ferroviario que tenemos. El día en que se produce el accidente de Córdoba, pasa el Lirio, descarrila, ven ustedes el Albia, y hay un centro de control y hay una llamada y el de Lirio llama y dice, oye, que he descarrilado. Y entonces dicen en el centro de control, sí, te estamos viendo. Pero del Albia no tenían ni idea. El Albia se había perdido, no sabían dónde estaba.
En pleno año 2026, es que es una absoluta barbaridad. Es que no hay por dónde cogerlo y el que defienda esto es un psicópata. No tiene otro nombre.
Ni puñetera idea de lo que había sucedido con el Albia en 2026 con la tecnología que tenemos. ¿Y saben qué se les ocurrió? Pues miren, lo que sucedió es descarrila el Lirio y de repente todos los pantógrafos bajan, las conexiones de los trenes paran. Obviamente hay que parar los trenes que están en ese entorno. Y se paran los trenes a 3 kilómetros detrás del Lirio y detrás del Albia. Y como no tienen ni idea de dónde está el Albia, y esta historia no nos la han contado.
Qué locura, tío.
Voy a contar a ustedes. ¿Saben lo que se le ocurre?
Y hay testimonios de esto. Hay testimonios de todo esto.
Se les ocurre. Cogen el teléfono y llaman al maquinista del tren que está detrás del Lirio. a un tren de Renfe que está detrás del Lirio y le llama y le dice: oye, maquinista, ¿te importa bajarte que hemos perdido el Albia y lo buscas tú por las vías? A ver si lo encuentras. Y el maquinista de ese tren, con una linternita, se baja de su tren y va caminando 2 kilómetros por las vías en absoluta oscuridad hasta que se encuentra el apocalipsis. Así se entera el Ministerio de Transportes de que el Albia ha tenido un accidente y de la cantidad de muertos que hay potencialmente ahí, porque hay un maquinista que se baja de su cabina con una linternita para buscar el Albia.
Y espérate, que esto no ha hecho nada más que empezar. Muy atentos a cómo está cagando vinagre la televisión del gobierno por la que se les viene. Están, pero...
Esto, si no es seguro circular para un maquinista, tampoco lo es para ni la tripulación ni los pasajeros. Y en estos momentos se están jugando conceptos muy gruesos en momentos muy delicados. Pero es que lo que se está instrumentalizando en los tribunales es todavía peor. Noticia de última hora. Atención a esto. Vox acaba de denunciar no al presidente de Adif, no solo al presidente de Adif, a la expresidenta, a quien se implicó en el caso Koldo. Nada que ver, cesada ya. Pero la ultraderecha acaba de presentar tribunales, Pedro Gómez, causa contra Isabel Pardo de Vera. Ahora mismo esto, en fin, ¿qué explica, qué clave tiene, cómo se lee esto?
Pues Vox acaba de anunciar esa querella y esa personación en el juzgado que va a instruir toda la investigación sobre este accidente de tráfico, ese juzgado de Montoro, y presenta esa querella contra la expresidenta de Adif, Isabel Pardo de Vera, y contra el actual presidente de Adif por hasta 8 delitos. Los considera responsables y negligentes del mantenimiento de las vías de la red ferroviaria y además también reclaman la declaración como testigo de José Luis Ábalos.
Testimonio de un maquinista. Ojito.
Pues bastante afectados, la verdad.
Recordemos, en menos de una semana han habido 4 descarrilamientos, que hay 2 de ellos de los que no se habla. El accidente de ayer del tren que se estampó contra un muro, que es del cual nos va a hablar este chico ahora mismo, y el chico que falleció en ese accidente, desgraciadamente, era uno de los 3 que iba en cabina junto al maquinista y esos 3 estaban en prácticas. Si no me equivoco, es un chico sevillano de 27 años que estaba justo haciendo las prácticas y fue el que perdió la vida. Descanse en paz.
Porque, bueno, pues nos ha podido pasar a cualquiera. En las últimas 48 horas pues ha habido 2 muertos, compañeros, y yo mismo tenía que haber cogido un tren ayer por la noche. Un compañero pasó por Gélida 20 minutos antes de que cayese el muro. Y, bueno, pues estamos muy mal, el colectivo, y por eso se ha convocado una huelga general, porque estamos viendo la degradación absoluta del servicio. El deterioro de la infraestructura lo vemos cada día trabajando. Siempre hablamos que en cualquier momento, cualquier día podemos morir en la vía y bueno, pues estamos viendo la consecuencia de ello. Yo ahora voy hacia Miranda de Ebro, de Zaragoza a Miranda, y eso pues lo tenía que haber hecho ayer mismo el tren, conduciendo yo el tren. Se ha suspendido y ahora tengo que ir yo de viajero en otro tren. Siempre piensas que puede ser tú, o sea, puede ser yo, puede ser cualquier compañero y es algo con lo que convivimos cada día. Mismamente la línea que va de Zaragoza a Miranda de Ebro, pues cualquiera que vaya a una cabina y vea el estado de la vía, hay 2, en Logroño y en Haro, hay 2 puntos en los que nos obligan a ir a 10 kilómetros por hora.
¡Qué barbaridad! A 10 kilómetros por hora.
Porque se está cayendo la vía directamente al río.
Yo es que alucino, pero vamos, es que me cago en mí. Ahora atentos a este testimonio de un pasajero de Lirio en el que cuenta cómo no apareció nadie hasta 2 horas después del accidente.
Somos conscientes de que ha golpeado y no sabemos que ha descarrilado. De hecho, hasta las 9:30, 10 menos cuarto, 2 horas más tarde del accidente, no aparece una persona desde la vía andando, solicitando ayuda, y de hecho el tripulante que nos había calmado en el tren sube al coche 8 que está volcado y grita: por favor, médicos, si hay algún enfermero en el pasaje, si hay médico en el pasaje, por favor, hay otro tren y está peor que nosotros.
Hay mucha gente poniendo en duda este testimonio y otros tantos parecidos a este en redes sociales, pero aparte de que es totalmente creíble, se verifica y tiene toda la credibilidad cuando partimos de la base, como hemos escuchado decir a Nacho Abad, que la propia centralita del sistema de trenes de nuestro país, que está en Atocha, que es la encargada de todas las comunicaciones, alertas, problemas, etcétera, no se había enterado ni siquiera de dónde estaba el Albia, ni de que había colisionado con el Irio, y tuvieron que ponerse en contacto con otro tren para que, oye, asómate a ver si ves algo por ahí. O sea, si tardaron un rato en enterarse de mala manera de lo que había sucedido, ¿cómo no van a tardar los servicios de emergencia? Por no poner, y no quiero atacar a ninguno de los servicios de emergencia, ellos al final son unos mandados, pero sí que se tardó en atender otra vez más a las víctimas del incidente.
Y en ese momento, Guardia Civil, bomberos, ambulancias empiezan a correr por la vía desde nuestro tren hacia el Albia, que estaba pues no sé cuántos metros más lejos y que nosotros ni veíamos ni éramos conscientes de que estaba ahí.
Sí, son como 700 metros por lo menos de distancia. Pero entonces la primera noticia que tenéis y que tienen los equipos médicos y los bomberos que están trabajando en el Irio, de que el Albia también se ha salido de la vía y que también está siniestrado y que está peor, la primera noticia que tenéis es por una persona que iba en el Albia, que viene caminando por la vía para pedir ayuda 2 horas después de que se haya producido el accidente.
Sí.
¡Qué locura! ¡Qué barbaridad, macho! Durante el día de hoy se ha hecho viral esta imagen y no es para menos porque al final es un claro reflejo de la situación que se lleva dando en este país desde hace mucho tiempo. A la izquierda tenemos uno de los trenes volcados, el Irio, que representa al pueblo español, sufriendo las vejaciones y las barbaridades que se le antojan a los de la derecha, que son todo el sistema político corrupto y por supuesto la Casa Real. Esta foto se ha hecho tan viral en redes sociales, tan viral, que se han visto obligados a borrarla hace escasos minutos de la página oficial de la Casa Real donde la tenían publicada. Porque obviamente la gente ha enloquecido diciendo, pero ¿cómo puede ser? Pero ¿sabéis qué es lo más heavy? Que lo he dicho ya en muchos posts, que cuando se hicieron supuestamente... no es una foto, sino una captura de uno de los videoreportajes que se hicieron durante la visita con estos, en fin, todavía había un cadáver que se sepa bajo el tren. Hasta dónde llega la enferma de esta gente. Ya han borrado la foto dado el escándalo que se ha hecho en redes sociales en base a esto. Y ahora vamos con nuestro queridísimo experto, y antes de dejaros su vídeo explicación que hizo ayer en un directo, que os voy a dejar el link del directo completo en la descripción porque es mucho más completo de lo que yo os voy a aportar. Yo he cortado una de las partes más fundamentales de su teoría y explicación de lo sucedido con algunos, bueno, con todo doblado con subtítulos en español, pero para poneros en contexto quiero que atendáis a esto porque es una parte fundamental de su explicación, aunque en cierta manera él ya lo dice. ¿Qué provoca que una unión soldada que ésta falle? Un posible culpable, dada la posición de la rotura, de la imagen de la rotura del raíl, que no sé si lo visteis, igualmente en el vídeo lo enseña, es que el calentamiento por la soldadura exotérmica no se gestionó adecuadamente. O sea, sé que el mantenimiento, o mejor dicho, la reparación, en la cual se invirtieron 700 millones, no sirvió para nada, lo que creó una estructura cristalina más débil en el acero adyacente a la soldadura, la zona afectada por el calor. Eso sí que yo lo tengo entendido, vamos, es decir, si esto es la soldadura, como que esta parte es mucho más fuerte, mucho más resistente, y sin embargo la parte adyacente es mucho más débil. Pero cuando se hace de mala manera, como la hicieron, aparte con, al parecer, materiales baratos para ahorrarse y rebañar más dinero, es aún más desastroso y por supuesto peligroso. Ahora sí, os dejo con el vídeo de Gareth, del directo que hizo ayer, explicando su teoría de lo sucedido.
Lots of information in one photo, and that's kind of how I got to the point where I could describe at midday yesterday, quite early on before most of the reporting, probably what happened. Not definitely, but probably based on like having looked at lots and lots of crashes in the past, lecturing on on rail derailments and how they work. So here's the track, here's the location, and that rail break is about 1 kilometre south of Adamu's depot, this kind of like sort of maintenance facility kind of on the high-speed line. You can see the piece of rail here, but also the other thing, Jamie, those other bits of rail, so that's only one piece. When you get this impact, like as that rail gets shattered to bits by all the passing axles, increasingly putting dynamic load into it, just bits of metal just go everywhere. They just get pinged all over the place, because we're talking about bits of metal, this size, not that heavy. Yeah, they'll have just been catapulted all over the place, right? So yeah, the fact that one of them has stayed here is quite remarkable. But all the others, like any other pieces, could have been flung all over the place, and I'll show you a picture later that kind of elaborate on that point. But anyway, so we've talked through this picture. Rail welds, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, there might be people watching this from Spain, because this might well come up in the algorithm. A rail weld is just that. You get two pieces of nice clean end of rail, and then you add extra metal or heat them up and stick them together, depending on what kind of weld it is. You've got the weld body here, which is a nice strong point, and then you've got what's called the heat affected area either side, where like the extra heat can change crystal structures in the metal, and managing that's really important. There's a whole science on welding that's, I might have a welding book behind me called Understanding Rails and Rail Welding. Things like this that allow you to understand how that actually works. So, rail welding, fine. So you've got your crack.
Why do you weld the two bits of rail?
Yes, because welding rails together is much safer and stronger than doing the old-fashioned thing where you have like a bolted joint, and that gives you a clackety-clack. The reason we don't do that is because those bolted joints have a nasty habit of reliably disintegrating under traffic, a bit like this, but much more frequently. And in fact, certainly in the UK, we went through a huge also, it's a huge maintenance liability, because you've got like hundreds of these things for a few miles of tracks. Every joint has to be unbolted, re-lubricated, tightened the right amount. Also, rails shuffle along. It's a huge maintenance liability having joints, like bolted joints, whereas welded joints, basically maintenance-free, very reliable, much safer, and they spread longitudinal loads from like hot weather much better as well. So that's why we have these rather than the old clackety-clack bolted joints like in ye olde times. So yeah, good question, actually. This is why I'm glad you guys are on for this particular bit. So we've got the train approaching. We've got the trains in question. So the northbound train going from south to north is red. It's Irio 6189. The southbound train, so Irio basically is Tren Italia, but the liberalized EU rail market running on the Spanish network. So it's like Tren Italia, but their brand in Spain is Irio. And the southbound train coming from the north is Renfe Alvia 2384. It's like one down from the high speed, the like premier high speed service in Spain. So it's a decent regional high speed service. Here are the two trains. The top one, Frecciarossi 1000, is a very nice high speed train. The bottom one is a Renfe Class 120. Is also nice, like it's a nice electric train. It does fancy gauge changey stuff. Its wheels go like narrower and wider to deal with the fact that Iberian gauge is a thing. Anyway, trains, they're nice. Fine, both of them, I'm sure the investigators will be looking at the maintenance records of those trains, but ostensibly nothing wrong with those trains. Good modern trains, very safe. So the train from the south, question marks over exactly what its speed was. Someone was reporting 110, others reporting 200, but basically it was going, let's say the worst speed in terms of energy, 200 kilometers an hour. Southbound one going about the same speed. This area has a speed limit of 250 kilometers an hour, so they're well below the speed limit. Trains going along here, the train, the red train going north at speed, hits that broken rail, and as it goes over, more of those wheels go over that break. It goes from being probably what was quite a nice clean crack or fracture into smashed up disintegration. And by the time the rear three cars of that train go over, they're derailed because the damaged track is not able to sustain that train. Well, they derail kind of rightwards into what railway people call the cess. The train goes along. Those trains, unfortunately, there is, by bad luck, a crossover, so a link between the two tracks a little bit beyond that rail break. So as soon as the train hits that, this is a very common thing to happen with these sorts of situations, particularly as this is what's known as a facing set of points. It deflects the train into the path or onto the other track, which, if the other train wasn't there, would have not been too much of a problem. Unfortunately, the other train was there. This is bad because that means that the other train coming south hits it really hard. And in doing so, now we can tell that it hit the train, by the way, because of all the scratches and damage on these three rear cars of the north-facing train. I would suspect it hit at the front end of the at the kind of the northern end of the second to last car, because that's where the most damage is. Yeah, not great. Collides with that and disappears over into a ditch in the kind of the other cess. Probably has a major secondary impact, because it pretty much stops dead at that point. The length of damaged track behind that train isn't long enough for kind of a normal deceleration. So I think it fell off and then very rapidly stopped, which is not good for humans inside a train. So you can sort of see this is the point at which the train had the impact, went offside. You can see all the track damage from the fact that the train has sort of slid off down into the cess. And then you can see, that's not a huge distance for a train going at 125 miles an hour. The back two coaches reasonably intact. The front two, not so much. Less so. That's a very rapid deceleration. And that video also allows you to sort of see where that crossover was, that kind of probably, not definitely, but probably is the thing that guided the derailed red wagons into the path of the white train. So yeah, not good. And that's why you see so much. This rapid deceleration is why I would suspect that a lot of the victims, of at least 40 people who've died and many others injured, were in that second train, because of how rapid that deceleration was, as well as the first impact with the red train. So not good. But then the other train continues reasonably unscathed, other than the kind of the roll over the rear wagon, about 600 meters further. And you can see this image shows the two trains and the fact that there's quite a distance between them. But this image really neatly shows the whole layout. So you can sort of see, it doesn't require a genius, just someone with a bit of experience of these things, to sort of see a probable way that this accident unfolded. This is not how lots of people were reporting it for quite a long time. It has to be said. It's worth saying that at the time of some of the immediate reporting, people talking about this is strange and uncommon. It's like, well, possibly if you're stood there as a politician, you're baffled, and probably quite a few politicians, local politicians particularly, are in shock, because it's a pretty horrifying thing to go and witness. But yeah, and also it's dark and you can't see what's going on. But the whole, after that trigger, it's all pretty predictable, to be honest. This is not like that mechanism is not unusual in any way. It's a pretty predictable set of the laws of physics are being obeyed here. Lots of elements of other crashes of the ways that the vehicles behave. It's all quite familiar, to be honest. So then the kind of the politics comes in, and the queries and the challenges. There's lots of discussion about, was it a signaling failure? Was it human error? Quite quickly they were able to rule that out. I think from the images you've seen, we've already shown it's quite. You can sort of see that, certainly in terms of like when it's human error, whether it's the signaling system. I don't expect this is a signaling failure, and certainly that crossover didn't cause the accident, in the sense that it didn't like wrongly direct the train into the path of the other train, because the crash happened further back. Like you can see that isn't what's happened. But there's just enough information before that smoking gun image came out, just enough information for there to be an enormous amount of bullshit flying around. And diagrams are one of the things that I saw a lot of, and this is one diagram which is wrong but not horrendous, because actually all this is the Daily Mail not knowing what direction trains go on on the Spanish high-speed lines.
Gareth, you see, if two trains love each other very, very much.
Yeah, quite. So actually this one's not so egregious, because you flip it and it's kind of essentially correct. But the worst one was, I've seen quite a few, and this is probably the most egregious example of like AI slop images of people going, can you create me a diagram of this crash? Don't do this. This looks. So a couple of things here. Number one, different like weird car lengths. Okay. Number two, why is this train why the front of the train and the other front of the train back to back here? What the hell is going on here? That
also why in every one of these images does it have like a terminus like end, whereas in the third image it just kind of just stops because it's just bored or something, I guess.
What is this? This doesn't exist anywhere. One of these doesn't exist for like miles either side of. What is this? And the trouble with this is not just that it's harmless fun. It's a bit wrong, doesn't matter. No, this is extremely misleading, because all of a sudden people are going, well, what about this switch? Did this fail? Is this part of the problem? It's like, no, that doesn't exist. Also like the pseudo-scientific stuff, like reconstruction, high-speed collision dynamics. It's like, no, what's high-speed collision dynamics? This is just a bullshit like text-to-image slop. The trouble with stuff like this is, well, a variety is misinformation, but also if you've been in this crash and you're kind of okay, like you're in the front end of the red train, say, you're going to be testifying about what you experienced. And you're probably also going to be on your phone looking at things to understand what the hell just happened to you. And you're going to spot shit like this, and it will change what you testify to investigators, because you'll think, well, yeah, I ran over this track, and I felt it when we did that. It's like, yeah, but that track doesn't exist. So like this sort of shit is really not good. But it's not just the AI slop, because actual professional journalists who create diagrams are equally as incompetent. Pretty rapidly after the crash, I saw this. This is just utter horseshit from top to bottom. This is not large language model text to image slop. This is just total made up fiction as to what's going on here. It's just wrong and suggests a completely different mechanism. This is facing the wrong way. The front of the red train did not do that, obviously, because it's intact.
It was not a head-on collision, because you would have seen the heads of the trains being exploded in the pictures. Exactly.
So this, like, it's amazing how many. I don't know why. All the nonsense diagrams circulating really angered me. I don't know why. I just got very angry, and it just feels like, particularly with the like slop stuff, it's just like we're entering a world of people creating things that look nominally convincing but are absolute horse shit. And again, the reason I put the real journalist diagram after the slop is because it's not like slop has made this new. We've been doing this for years. It's just that the slop kind of makes that turnaround that much. Well, let's just say it makes it more accessible, right?
If the journalists waited for the facts, then someone else might publish something ahead of them, and we can't have that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, quite. So I want to talk about, so this is a picture from the Hatfield derailment in 2000 in the UK, which shares a lot of commonality between, there's a lot of familiarity between this and the Adamers crash, particularly this stuff. So Jamie, this comes back to your point of, where did the rails go that are missing? And I've had a lot of conspiracy theorists on Twitter going, what are you on about? Why is that rail missing? It's disappeared. It's like, well, the thing is, right, this is Hatfield.
Has it simply not just like exploded into a million pieces under the like speed and the pressure, and just like, like you'll be picking tiny bits of that rail out of the siding for the next 100 years?
Well, it could be that, or it could be that like the Russians went down there with a large saw and just took it away. So.
Which is very true.
It's amazing.
Vladimir Putin with the crowbar and the rail embankment. All right, cool. I'm there with you.
I had Russia did this. I had Mossad did this. It's like, my dude, Israel are doing a literal fucking genocide. You do not need to invent random evil shit that they're doing. Just look at anything they are actually documenting themselves doing, and they are as evil as any entity can possibly be. They don't need to then randomly do a rail crash in Spain to be more evil. Like, why are you making this shit up? No, you're exactly right, Rob. This is Hatfield. It's a pretty extreme example, because actually it was 35 meters of rail that literally shattered like glass, and bits of steel sent everywhere under the train. 200 different pieces, of which a few are in the Railway Museum. This was a different type of failure. It was a fatigue failure, and in this case there was just cracking, for like extreme cracking for a whole length of rail. The crack in the Adamers crash is very different. I suspect it's a defect that has resulted in a single fracture, possibly exacerbated by cold weather, because steel contract in cold weather, so it puts a lot of tensile stress on the rail. So I suspect it was a single crack that opened and then was run over. But that like 50 centimeter section of rail that isn't all visible in that photo, as you say, shattered, and those bits of steel will have been sent everywhere. So that's kind of what happened here. But you can sort of see similar patterns of the behavior of the vehicles. And I suppose partly I put these pictures up to make the point that the behavior of vehicles in these situations is predictable. The way that wheels dig into ballast, the way that vehicles are deflected by... So the other painful crash here
is... physics is physics in England as well as in Spain, as well as in Mexico and in, wherever other fine trains can be found.
Yeah, exactly. So people going, oh, how do you know any of this? It's like, well, the point after the trigger is the thing that is the stuff that's basically quite predictable. It's the stuff before the trigger that is not predictable. I have no evidence as to why that break happened. I have some ideas as to what might have caused it. I have some ideas as to what the actual break in the rail was caused by, because again, that's engineering rather than organizational stuff. But ultimately, that's the tricky stuff in the investigation to understand.
Yeah.
You know, they will be going,
Yeah.
yeah, like, what are the standards for inspection? What are the standards for installing welds? Were those standards being followed? Were the organizations doing the inspection, telling the organizations doing the maintenance? These are the questions, you know, and so on and so on. You know, budgets, renewals, what happened at the renewal a year ago, all these sorts of things are the investigation, are much more interesting, frankly, than how the derailment itself occurred. You know, don't get me wrong, crashworthiness, you know, for example, the Franxuh 1000 train, this thing, you know, an impressively high amount of energy, and the performance of this vehicle was extremely good. You look how intact those coaches still are, given the impact. It's
like, I mean, there's a lot of damage everywhere, but it's not like they haven't like accordioned onto themselves, or like there's not like a massive chunk ripped out of the side or something.
This train was hit by another train going in the opposite direction, a closing speed of potentially 400 kilometers an hour. You know, marginally less, and all the couplings held intact, which is so important for the safety of a train. It's really impressive. So crashworthiness is absolutely something the investigation will look at. I'll understand, well, what was good, what was less good, you know, what could have been changed. But that's the most interesting and important questions the investigation will be looking at is everything that led up to the derailment, not necessarily the actual events of the derailment itself. So that's kind of a thing I wanted to kind of point out and mark out, but also highlight another painful thing, which is, had that other train, I just want to emphasize, if we wouldn't be having this conversation, no one would be talking about this, if that other white train had just not been at exactly the wrong place, exactly the wrong time. It is painful for all those victims of how much chance has played a role in this incident. It is, you know, seconds fast, you know, seconds earlier, seconds later, and you would not have seen this derailment go this way. You know, that rear coach there would probably still be upright, and it's certainly the case that white train would just wouldn't have been involved in the crash at all. It's really.
I mean, you're talking about like an incident window of a couple of seconds, essentially, exactly. Or I don't know, maybe 10 seconds or something for these trains to sort of not crash into each other, but slide past each other in such ways to derail them.
Yeah, it's painful. And so those are the interesting things the investigation will uncover. And I await that investigation. I hope it will, you know, Hatfield, it was 6.5 years before we had the full picture. I really hope that it doesn't take that long for this.
Pues ahí lo tenéis, saquen sus propias conclusiones. Espero que la justicia, o la poca que queda en este país, no solo señale a los culpables, sino que los meta entre rejas como mínimo. Si ha llegado a este momento del vídeo, como siempre, agradecértelo enormemente. Gracias por el apoyo, el cariño que me dais. Viva España, viva la hispanidad y vivan los españoles.